Sylvie becomes aware slowly, not as a body rising, but as a thought sharpening inside a mind that is not her own. Darkness gives way to shapes carved from pale, humming bone, and she realizes she is standing within a preserved memory rather than a physical place. The walls vibrate with echoes of lives long extinguished, and every surface seems to breathe with faint psychic residue. She tries to anchor herself, reaching for her own identity, but strands of alien recollection press in on every side. Their emotions bleed into hers: grief, pride, fear, a distant triumph turned to ruin. As she moves, the memory shifts around her like a living book turning its pages, and she understands she has stepped into the recorded consciousness of a dead craft world. The bone-made circuits remember more clearly than flesh ever could. Before we descend into the chaos of this tale, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more legends and dark histories from the Warhammer 40K universe. A whisper of movement glides across her thoughts, not footsteps, but minds brushing past, drifting like ghosts with purpose she cannot yet decipher. The sensation is cold and ancient, and for the briefest moment she feels watched by presences that do not need eyes. Her enchantment instinctively reaches outward, seeking a mind to touch, to hold, to command, but finds instead only echoes, drifting like distant storms. Something here speaks before she can, and she senses that she has not simply arrived. She has taken a seat already occupied by countless voices layered through time. The memory deepens around her. Light shifts across the bone as if reacting to her presence. The world is silent, but the silence feels crowded. Sylvie steels herself, knowing she must find the thread that leads from this echo into whatever real space still surrounds it, for she can feel the pressure of something vast moving just beyond the veil. And as she prepares to step forward, she realizes this place is not merely remembering the dead. It might be trying to show her why she was brought here at all. Sylvie lifts her hand and lets her fingers glide across the wraithbone surface, expecting only cold matter. Instead, the structure reacts like a living nerve. A pulse of psychic light flickers beneath her touch, and suddenly the craft world begins to answer her presence. Images burst into her mind in sharp, vivid flashes. She sees a civilization shaped by artistry and precision, a people who sculpted cities from living bone and spoke in colors of thought rather than sound. Their towers rose like frozen songs, and their halls shimmered with quiet brilliance. For a moment, she feels their pride, their elegance, their certainty that their mastery of the mind made them untouchable. But the next pulse darkens. The scenes twist into decadence stretched over centuries, pleasure turning to obsession, and obsession to something darker. The art grows warped, the emotions harsher, as if desire itself had become a beast with too many mouths. Sylvie senses the shift not only as vision but as taste, a sour bitterness that curls along her tongue like spoiled magic. The craft world shows her the moment brilliance rotted into catastrophe, when their collective excess tore a wound in reality and gave rise to a hunger vast enough to devour them. It was a birth born of collapse, the creation of a force that fed on hope, fear, ambition, and every emotion they once believed they controlled. The wraithbone trembles under her hand. The infinity circuit stirs, its remaining echoes drifting toward her like fragile embers. They brush her thoughts, faint and desperate, carrying centuries of warning. Sylvie feels the ghosts inside the circuitry, not living spirits, but impressions so strong they still cling to their final moments. She tastes their terror at the warp call they awakened, a lingering psychic scar that never fully healed. For the first time, Sylvie realizes she is not simply observing history. She is touching a wound that still bleeds into the present. The craft world remembers because it must. It remembers because forgetting would invite the same hunger to rise again. And as its memories settle into her mind like frost, she knows the entity born from that ancient downfall has already noticed her arrival. Sylvie moves like a whisper, learning the shape of a new weapon. The preserved memory around her is both map and maze, and she treats it as classroom. She begins with small experiments, because large gambits in a place this old and thin could draw attention she does not yet want. Her first acts are quiet, almost playful. She breathes an illusion across a long corridor and watches carved reliefs shift as if warmed by a passing hand. A statue's painted eye seems to blink, and for a moment a trick of light makes her think the dead craftworld smiles back. The effect is small, but it reaffirms what she already suspects. Her powers still answer, yet they respond in new keys here. Her enchantment feels different under the craftworld's skin. Back in the places she knows, a word or a glance might tilt a mind. Touch is only one of many routes. Here the wiring is intimate and physical. A fingertip against a bone plate is like placing a key against a lock. When she lays a blade-flat hand on a carved face, memory sparks travel through the channel, and for a second a fragment of thought slides into her palm like a coin. This is not possession like a thief taking a house. It is more like opening a sealed letter and hearing the last voice that ever bent the paper. She learns that the dead here keep their thoughts in loops, repeating the last things they felt, and that to possess is to converse with those last notes rather than to seize a living will. She practices with gentleness first. A touch to a guard effigy coaxes a lullaby of pride, and she then folds that pride into a soft illusion of living flesh. The hall answers, as if remembering how to hold motion. Her enchantments take on a new color. They are not merely commands, they are invitations into a conversation. When she slips her fingers into the mindset of an ancient engineer, she hears not language but sequences of pattern and purpose. How a machine should sing, when a seal must be tightened, the cadence of a ward's pulse. These technical echoes are dry and useful. She stores them, learns to build from them, and steals small efficiencies for her later work. Her lavender patience cracks sometimes into mischief. She finds a carved child in a side alcove and makes stone laugh, and the sudden levity tastes odd and almost forbidden. The infinity circuits ghosts rustle like disturbed pages. Sometimes their echoes push back. A memory that resists becomes a thorn in her hand, prickling like frostbite on a living finger. Those moments teach her caution. The craftworld's memories are not merely data. They are held by the last rituals of a dying people, and some of those rituals were defenses against exactly her kind of curiosity. Her body, too, reminds her that she is not merely mind. Frost giant muscle and trained knives sit ready. She practices blending both. After opening a mind, she practices closing it again with the speed of a hand sliding a blade into sheath. Enchantment in this place requires the same precision as a knife-edge parry. She cannot let possession linger. The longer she stays inside another will, the more the craftworld's residue rubs off on her own taste. Learning here is not purely technique. It is a lesson in tone and ethics. She experiments with consent, trying to coax memories that want to speak rather than brute force ones that will fight her. The difference becomes clear. Willing echoes offer clarity and cooperation, while resistant memories bite back, pulling at her own threads until she must let go. That restraint keeps her cleaner. It keeps her safer from the warp-sour tang that seeps from the deeper scars. By the time she withdraws from the first long corridor, Sylvie has folded a dozen new habits into her moves. Her illusions are softer, keyed now to runic accents that the bone seems to accept. Her enchantments have learned the difference between theft and dialogue. The craftworld has taught her one lesson above all. Here, to touch a mind is to enter a shared room. You must offer space when you enter. You must leave it as you found it unless you mean to stay, and the cost of staying may be to let the world remember you back. The hum of distant reactors becomes a drum that writes itself across the craftworld's bones. Sylvie feels it as a vibration under her feet and as a pressure at the edge of her senses. The augury within the preserved memory tightens, warning like a held breath. Far above the dome, dark shapes gather, a human fleet, heavy and angular, moving with the confidence of a species that names its wars and preys over them. Their engines beat like armor, and every pulse sends waves through the wraithbone. The craftworld answers in kind, a living instrument resonating to a new and foreign tempo. It takes only a few moments for Sylvie to understand the weight of those ships. They are not merely vessels, they are rolling cathedrals of doctrine, prayer engines thrumble beside reactors. Channelers chant while guns wind up. Where this world stores memory inside bone and rune, the humans store their power in ritual and hatred. The arrival of a fleet means more than a battle, it means judgment. The Inquisition moves like weather. It arrives not only to fight, but to read and to decide. To be read by them is to be measured against a rigid scale no living person has written for Sylvie's kind. She tastes the imminence of choices like a metallic note at the back of her throat. If the Inquisition finds what they believe is a seed of chaos, they will not merely take it, they will cut and burn until not even the memory remains. The craftworld's bones could be stripped to amber and the infinity circuit pried open to see the threads inside. Sylvie balks at that. She has learned to respect the dead here. She has begun to shape herself from what she has taken. The thought that an order of zeal would reduce those memories to test samples fills her with an odd fury. This knowledge sharpens her plan-making. She measures what she has harvested and decides how much of herself she will risk displaying. The fleet's presence makes strategy necessary where curiosity once satisfied. She must choose between hiding in the circuits and acting in the living world that still orbits the craft. Both choices carry danger. Hiding alone could mean being trapped within memory, a ghost in a ghost. Acting openly could draw the Inquisition's fire and make her a target for other hungers that lurk in the warp. Sylvie also senses another complication. Attention breeds appetite. The very power that draws the Inquisition will also drag other predators. Drukhari pirouettes, Thousand Suns scholars, watchers that wear gold like crowns, each will read this change on the cosmic ledger and mark it. The presence of human prayer machines is a bell that rings in many halls. Everyone with stakes here moves to hear how the bell tolls. She leverages those sensations into preparation. There is no panicked scrambling. Rather, Sylvie assembles subtle defenses and gathers information. She threads runic alterations into the corridors she plans to use, small charms that misdirect ritual scanners and make bone memory sing a private lullaby instead of a beacon. She carves illusions into doorways that distort what inquisitors see long enough for her to plan. These are temporary measures, delicate and imperfect, but they aim to buy a margin of time. Time matters because the fleet's circling is patient. These are not scouts, they are a court making up its mind. The drums above will eventually descend, and the first who step inside the halls will be those trained to make hard choices. Sylvie feels the pressure of inevitability like a tightening glove on her hand. She must act, not merely watch. So she moves from study to stance. Her knives sit on her thighs. Her enchantments lie ready beneath her skin like loaded springs. The craftworld's memory hums at her back. Around her, the preserved thoughts shift, aware in their own way. They are not passive, and neither is she. The circle tightens. The fleet watches. A decision will soon unfold, and everything that comes next will pivot around whether Sylvie steps into the light or stays within bone and shadow. The boarding is surgical and precise. A single shuttle detaches from the larger vessel and plunges toward the craftworld like a fist aimed at a bruise. It opens with ritual efficiency, disgorging a handful of figures in Baroque armor decorated with seals and script. They move like an execution team that reads its prayers aloud as maintenance. Their leader walks with a metal jaw and a mind tuned to accusation, and the air around them smells of authority and fear. They search as they step, voices flat and controlled. Their instruments translate distant echoes into hard data. Where the craftworld stores memory in bone and signal, these humans store verdicts in ritual and declaration. They are obviously not there to learn, but to categorize, to define, to clamp a label onto whatever they find. That hunger for taxonomy is as dangerous as any weapon. Sylvie understands that a forwarded verdict from these zealots would turn her safe haven into a wound. She greets them on her own terms, not from the open but from the edges. Illusion becomes her shield. She bends the way light falls in the corridor to make their armored forms seem misaligned, their steps oddly echoing out of sync. A carved sentinel appears to move and blocks their path. These tricks buy her seconds, and each second is a small victory. She moves like a blade of grass, soft and hard. When one of the zealots slips past her first line of illusions, she meets him with a touch rather than a shout. A simple graze of palm to throat, a light press across a temple, and a thought spark that tastes of sleep. Her enchantment works in the craft world like a slow knife, sliding open the mind and letting her voice inside. The man's world dims, fear softens, and his suspicions fold like paper. She does not overwrite him, she guides. The touch is intimate and careful because she knows the cost of misstep. If an inquisitor's mind detects manipulation, the response is violent and punitive. Still, she cannot touch every head. Two of them begin to chant a constricting prayer designed to strip illusions and reveal true form. Sylvie reacts with speed, a flash illusion that makes the corridor look like an endless stare. The men hesitate, split, argue. In the confusion, she takes a riskier step. She moves into the leader's personal space and lands a firmer touch. This is not theft of free will, but a persuading, a gentle knot in his resolve that loosens his immediate need to condemn. He steps back, uncertain, and for a moment the balance shifts. Her gambit buys time, but it also paints a target on her. The leader frowns as if remembering something in the back of his mind he cannot place, and he mutters new orders that seem softer than the old ones. The team continues to sweep the halls, but their tempo is different now, less murderous, more careful. Sylvie watches them through layered illusions, listening to the scrape of metal on bone and to the way their ritual sounds change pitch. She learns their rhythms and adapts. Contact has become a game of inches and secrets. She is careful to make the boarding team think they control the narrative while she quietly threads her own. Every touch is a promise and a risk. When she releases the man she possessed, she leaves a phantom memory that suggests a false lead, a whisper toward a different sector of the world. It is a small, elegant deception. Send them chasing ghosts while she secures what matters. But the craft world's echo is not helpless. As the Inquisition sweeps, faint ancestral memories stir and sometimes murmur against her manipulations. A chorus of old pride or anger will flare and complicate her work, because to touch the past is also to rile it. Contact is accomplished not by force but by deftness. She leaves the zealots walking in circles for a while, chasing shadows, while she uses the pause to prepare for the predators that smell the commotion. The boarding crew believes they are the hunters. Sylvie quietly makes them the prey of her plans. No alarm sings before the strike. The craft world seems to inhale and then exhale violence. From fissures in the carved halls, from vents meant for ritual air, the raiders appear as if they were always part of the architecture. They are lithe and cruel, moving with a grace honed by savagery. Pain is their instrument and spectacle, and their blades sing like annexed laughter. The Drukhari come with a hunger that is almost ritual itself. They do not merely attack to kill, but to taste and to prolong the final moments of their victims. Sylvie is ready in the sense she can be only because she has prepared the memory paths and misdirections. Her enchantments flare into action to deflect and confuse, and the illusions shear and fold as required. She uses her knives, swift as timing itself, and her enchantments, sharp as edged promises. For one raider, she lays a touch that turns hatred into vacuous curiosity. The creature stumbles, bewildered. For another, she finds the mind flavored by pain and sees how it feeds the raider's strength. She does not simply repel such a one. She occupies it briefly, a flicker of possession that teaches her more about how their hunger works. The Drukhari fight like dancers on a broken stage. They are fast, and their attacks aim to unravel armor and nerve. Wonder and disgust mingle in Sylvie as she reads how their cruelty is fueled. Their pleasure is a psychic toxin that ties into the warp-sour residue of the craft world. When they cut, they do not simply take blood, they harvest response. This changes the terms of the skirmish. Her old tricks that relied on borrowed terror must be modified. Now she must cut through joy as well as fear. Brutality sharpens into negotiation because neither side expects absolute victory. The Inquisition fights with a tactical slow burn, reliable but heavy. The Drukhari are quick, ephemeral, and leave scars meant to last. Sylvie finds herself between these forces, shaping a blade of compromise. She can protect the Inquisition at cost, or she can let the Drukhari feast and then hunt them later. Her decision is pragmatic. Buy time by trading a taste of chaos for information and movement. So she fights and then bargains. She offers the Inquisition cover and a false trail in exchange for shelter and a promise that they will not scour the craftworld bare. She offers the Drukhari the illusion of a feast that will draw them away from the heart of the memory and toward a staged trap. The raiders, arrogant and curious, bite. They come to a courtyard where illusions make the bones look alive and the air taste like a banquet. As they feast on false flesh and phantom screams, Sylvie slips a subtle possession into the leader's head that blinks the hunger and boredom at intervals, making him reckless. The plan is not flawless. Violence still breaks out. Swords find bone, and blood stains runes that did not expect it. The Drukhari slice and run, leaving behind a wreckage of pride and broken wards. The Inquisition shrugs off wounds that would fell others and continues their slow, methodical work. Yet the skirmish ends with both predators checked, and with Sylvie having learned important lessons about how each kind of hunger tastes and moves. She realizes that in this grotesque ecology, control is temporary and cooperation is fragile. Her bargain holds only so long as the interests on each side align. When the last raider flees into a shadow that becomes a wound again, Sylvie breathes and counts the cost. She has kept the core memory intact and bought a measure of time. She has also marked herself. Her touch against the leader left a signature. Predators will remember. The Drukhari will not forget the pleasure they sensed here. The Inquisition will not forget the hand that altered their leader's thoughts. For now, a fragile truce binds them. The craftworld hums, slightly less anxious. But Sylvie knows that the peace is brittle as lacquered bone. It will not withstand the next storm unless she steels herself and makes allies that can hold more than a week's promise. Negotiations after blood are never graceful. They smell of iron and old prayers. The Inquisition withdraws its wounded in a measured procession, shields and runs of prayer forming a moving fortress. Sylvie stands at the edge of the temporary perimeter, knife at her hip and the craftworld's ghosts like a chorus behind her. She meets the Inquisitor's gaze without film. There is no pretense of trust between them. The Inquisitor sees her as a variable to be contained, and Sylvie sees the Inquisitor as a force that can either protect the fragile memory she has come to respect or destroy it in the name of purity. The terms are hard and the language is barbed. Sylvie offers what she has learned to spare the craftworld from a full purge. She will guide the Inquisition away from the Infinity Circuit's central nodes and give them false leads that will waste their time and appetite. In return, she asks sanctuary, the right to remain within a sealed enclave, and a promise that their forces will not strip the world of its last memories for study. The Inquisitor's public face is one of suspicion, but private calculation appears in the slight toll of his shoulders. He weighs the cost of ignoring a source of forbidden power against the potential advantage her knowledge might grant. Even zealots bargain when the ledger favors them. Sylvie knows how to sweeten a deal. She presents strategic fragments of information she has gleaned, locations of dormant wards, the names embedded in the Infinity Circuit that the Inquisition has marked in their secret ledgers as possible conduits, and false coordinates that will waste days of their time. The offer is practical and tempting. Information can be made into leverage, turned into safe withdrawal, and she uses it as both carrot and shield. The Inquisitor's hand hovers near a rosary and then relaxes. The bargain, sharp and cold, is accepted. Yet acceptance comes with a blade of oath. The Inquisitor binds Sylvie with a pact of mutual usefulness. He will thin his curators, lines, and allow her a small enclave where she may work and learn, but she will answer for the secrets she keeps and will not interfere with certain sanctioned rituals. He marks the agreement with a spoken vow and a signet whose weight is both legal and lethal. Sylvie accepts because the price of refusal is immediate and brutal. A hunt for the Infinity Circuit and the ripping open of the craftworld, until its secrets are bared and burned. The temporary alliance alters the playing field. For a while, the Inquisition acts as a buffer between her and the predators she cannot yet handle alone. Their grudging protection grants her time to press deeper into memory and to learn how to make the craftworld's language do new things for her. In public, the Inquisition patrols and studies, but behind their armor they whisper warnings and do not fully trust the one who bent their officer's mind. Sylvie's touch, once secret, is now a matter of record. The scar of that touch will be traced by minds that do not forget. She also must placate other players. News of the bargain spreads across circuits and into the warp like a smell. The Thousand Suns notice. The Drukhari note opportunity. Every faction that feeds on discord and knowledge recalculates their hunger. This temporary truce is an uneasy bandage. It buys time but not safety. Sylvie understands the paradox. Every ally is another eye, and every promise is a chain. Still, bargains are weapons in themselves. They create windows, and she intends to use them. With the Inquisition's tacit protection, she secures a vaulted chamber where she can more safely engage the Infinity Circuit's lesser echoes. She installs small runic edits that shield certain data from inquisitorial scanners while leaving crumbs sufficient to honor their agreement. The alliance holds tonight. Dawn will bring more decisions. For now, she keeps the knives close and the oaths closer, and she prepares for the long work of carving a path through a galaxy whose appetite has only just noticed her. A presence arrives with the weight of libraries and battlefields combined. He steps from a ripple of blue flame, his armor a midnight tide etched with eyes and arcane script. Where he walks, the air tastes like old books and static. He moves with an academic patience that hides a predator's timing, and his gaze reads the room as if it were a page of prophecies. The librarian does not announce himself with banners or bluster. He offers conversation like a knife offered handle first, polite and dangerous. His words are smooth and layered, compliments folded over threats until it is difficult to tell where the offer ends and the demand begins. Sylvie senses the nature of his power at once. It is not merely psychic muscle, though that is present in abundance. It is a tradition that molds the mind and then reshapes the universe by cataloging which truths will be allowed to stand. He speaks of knowledge as a currency that redeems and binds, and he promises access to shelves of forbidden learning in exchange for a cooperation framed as mutual benefit. He admires her adaptability, the way she has bent local memory to her will, and his praise is a mirror that reflects both respect and appetite. She tests him with light touches, probing for the seams the craftworld leaves exposed. The librarian responds with a game of intellectual parry, folding her probes into his larger pattern and then releasing them to watch her reactions. There is a curiosity in him, an urge to understand the novelty of her hybridity, frost giant strength, trickster enchantment, and a self-taught approach to sorcery. To a Thousand Suns scholar, such a combination reads like an experiment that might either yield a new weapon or explode the lab. Sylvie hears the subtext beneath his manner. He speaks of the warp as an ocean that can be mapped, not a beast to be feared. He positions the Thousand Suns as cartographers of that ocean, and he suggests that her talents would be more useful by their side. He couches the proposition in the language of partnership. Share your methods, and in return they will show how to bind the warp into instruments rather than be shaped by it. The offer appeals to a scholar's hunger inside her. He tempts with secrets, with cures for her old wounds and methods to make enchantment steady beyond her present limits. But beneath the polished promises, Sylvie smells rot. The librarian's knowledge is gilded by compromise. She senses traces of corruption in the way his aura folds inward when he claims he has studied restraint. He invokes the glory of mastery and the inevitability of utilitarian choices, and such rationalization often masks the slow creep of surrender. The Thousand Suns have their own history of bargains struck with costs that were always deferred until too late, and she knows this pattern well enough to resist flattery that smells like a cage. She refuses him, not with bluster, but with a clear, small demonstration. She uses her enchantment to open a corner of his mind briefly, not to steal, but to show the truth as a mirror. In that instant, he feels what it is to be touched by a will that does not seek dominion, but insists on autonomy. He recoils with surprise and interest at the same time. His retreat is not humiliation, but a recalibration. He will return, she understands. Knowledge hungers, and those who collect it rarely walk away from a specimen they believe worth studying. The exchange leaves new marks. He has tasted her mind and left his own scent. She has seen how he frames power and where his rationalizations bend. Most importantly, she has learned how he tests limits, with offers wrapped in pleasantries and an undercurrent of inevitable compliance. That pattern will inform every later interaction. For now, she closes the small breach in his privacy, wipes the impression of her fingers on the edges of his memory, and listens as he moves away like a shadow reading aloud. The craftworld's preserved ghosts stir at the presence of the librarian, their echoes a reminder that knowledge can liberate or chain, and that any alliance with a collector of secrets demands payment that is seldom counted in coin. The craftworld's language is not spoken so much as felt. It lies in the curvature of bone, in the pulse of runes that map intent to structure. Sylvie discovers this through failure first. Her first attempts to replicate familiar charms return yawning, awkward echoes. Illusions she could weave almost blind in other places rip and fray when applied to wraithbone corridors. Possession that once slid through a mind like oil finds friction here as if the circuits themselves resist blunt imposition. The world rejects mechanics that ignore its grammar, and Sylvie learns that surviving here means becoming a translator. Her adaptation is practical and patient. She spends long hours pressing fingers to carved ribs and listening to the hum beneath the surface. The infinity circuit's echoes are like dialects, each node speaking a slightly different syntax of feeling and memory. She learns to map these dialects, to recognize a ceremonial ward's cadences versus the more conversational murmurings that run through servants' chambers. From this mapping, she derives a new vocabulary, sigils that are not simply symbols, but keys shaped to the craftworld's own resonant frequencies. She writes them in her mind the way knife handles are learned, with tactile memory just as important as theoretical understanding. Her experiments blend improvisation and respect. She borrows the craft's sigils and weaves them with her own rune work learned from quick study, creating hybrid runes that function like joints between different physics. Her illusions begin to bend the bone rather than merely pretending it moved, and her enchantments find purchase in the skeleton's memory pathways. Instead of forcing another to feel fear, she learns to shift the pattern that produces fear within the craft's local frame, nudging it toward uncertainty rather than overwhelming panic. The result is cleaner, subtler, and less likely to draw the attention of predators tuned to the warp's scream. She also retools her knife work. The physicality of her frost giant physiology becomes part of the ritualization. Hands that once only assaulted now carve runic grooves and brace rune-bound seals. She trains to place a touch that is simultaneously a physical pressure and a mnemonic trigger, a motion that both wounds and whispers. The knives, once instruments of shock, take on roles as styluses for writing new thoughts into the bone. In this way, she uses violence as a language of change rather than only as an expression of force. Learning the language also teaches restraint. The craftworld's memories are lived experiences, and forcing them too quickly risks contamination. She learns to solicit permission, to invite a memory to speak rather than ripping information from it. This shift in method reduces the warp-sour residues that cling to her spirit. It is a kind of ethics born of survival, better to be a skilled interlocutor than a looter of spoils. Those memories that consent reward her with clarity and tools. Those that resist become defensive and dangerous. As her fluency grows, the world itself becomes more cooperative. Where once the corridors resisted her manipulations, now they yield answers with a faint sigh. She can call on stored echoes to provide technical knowledge, to recall defensive patterns, or to reveal the locations of ancient wards. The craftworld aligns with her not because she conquered it, but because she learned to speak with its syntax, and that shift alters her relationship to power. No longer merely an intruder, she becomes a kind of guest who honors the rules of a house, and in doing so, can sit at its table. Her adaptation is not complete. There are still corners of the infinity circuit whose language she cannot parse and phrases of memory that are expressions of grief too dense to translate. But each day her hybrid runes grow more precise. Illusions that once tore now fold like cloth. Enchantments that would have been invasive now open doors like courteous knocks. In learning to speak the craftworld's language, she learns also how to remain distinct. Her methods are hybrid, dangerous, and uniquely hers. They give her a new class of knife, not only for cutting, but for writing legislation upon a world whose laws were long ago broken. The Infinity Circuit is a humming archive. It keeps its secrets like a slow heart keeps rhythm. Once Sylvie earns small trust with the preserved echoes, fragments of direction begin to surface. They come as sensations first, a pull like a tide in the skull, a pattern of light that resolves into coordinates in the mind. The circuit does not speak in direct commands but in associations, and she must learn to follow the threads like a reader scanning marginalia. These threads point her to a name repeated with reverence, Ulwi. The craftword Ulwi is not dead. It lives and sings, a place where memory is tended rather than left to fray, where seers keep watch over the borders between what is remembered and what is possible. She understands the risk and the promise in equal measure. Ulwi has the knowledge and the sanctity to help her understand how the warp ties to dimensional seams. It may also bear its own politics of secrecy and guardianship. To approach Ulwi is to step toward a society that can either be an ally in the slow work of constructing a path home, or a tribunal that will assess and bind her. Her choice is pragmatic. The immediate safety of secrecy within a ruined world cannot hold indefinitely. Learning and leverage are her tools, and Ulwi holds both. Travel is not simple. The sling ring trick she once used to fold space is stubborn in this universe. Dimensional coordinates do not behave the same when the fabric itself has been stretched and mended by alien rites. Sylvie repurposes her technique, combining it with the craftworld's psychic cadences she has learned. She crafts a portal that is less a doorway and more a careful invitation, a ring keyed not only to distance but to memory, addressing Ulwi by the affinities it keeps within its bones. The opening is slow and ugly by her old standards. The portal resists, sashing like a surly guard who does not welcome strangers. For a heartbeat, the ring shudders and the air fills with static, as if the craftworld itself struggles to accept a passage made without its consent. Then a channel steadies, a thin braid between spaces, and Sylvie steps through with coat billowing and knives tight to her belt. The portal snaps shut behind her like folding a book. There is no falling or cinematic arrival, rather, a sliding into a different cadence of life. Ulwi is immediately different. Living wraithbone is warm to the touch, reverberating with a focused intent. The halls pulse with rune song. Seers walk in measured steps that feel like prayers converted into muscle. Civilians move with quiet awareness, their faces marked by an age that has learned to be wary yet graceful. The craftword watches a new arrival like an animal that has recognized a common scent. Here, memory is tended like a garden rather than hoarded like treasure. The infinity circuit of Ulwi does not simply store souls, it curates them, pruning and teaching them to contribute rather than to rot. She is greeted not with suspicion alone, but with study. Always watchers tilt their heads and glance with eyes that have seen many crossings. They sense the warp's touch on her and the foreign logic in her tricks. Their interest is professional rather than immediate hostility. They will demand accountings and perform tests. Sylvie gives measured answers and reveals only enough to invite further conversation. She needs Ulwi more than Ulwi needs her novelty, but she also knows that what passes for aid here will be bartered in knowledge and caution. The journey to Ulwi has carried her beyond the thin safety of bone memory into a living archive that might teach her how to thread a path home without feeding the warp's appetite. They surround her in small clusters at first, then in a ring that feels like a seal. The Eldar seers of Ulwi are tall and slow in motion, their robes trailing runes that flicker with a kind of attentive hunger. Their eyes are not merely pale but glassy, as if they watch multiple timelines at once. When they study her, it is with an intensity both clinical and intimate, like a cartographer tracing shorelines for signs of storms. They do not rush because time is part of their craft. Their voices, when they speak, move like stones sliding into a pattern. Each syllable adds weight to a tableau rather than scolding a trespasser. Sylvie steps into that ring with sticks and knives replaced by manners and questions. She offers small truths and larger evasions in equal measure. The Eldar respond with a ritual calm, allowing her to present herself as both threat and curiosity. Their readings are not intrusive in the blunt sense. Instead, they are invitations to reveal who she is by the choices she makes under observation. They ask questions that are not words as much as mirrors. In their queries, she sees paths forming and closing. They do not merely look at her. They look at the fork her presence makes in their future. The seers speak of balance as if it were a physical law. They tell her that arrivals like hers are nodes in patterns they call the skein, intersections where fate branches and new stories begin or old ones end. They do not claim to be impartial. Their duty is survival, and they assess whether a node will bring peril or promise. Sylvie senses no single definition from them. Each seer models a different weight. One watches the possibility of her becoming a bulwark against the changeling god's expansion. Another counts the risk she could offer as a beacon that draws predators. Their consensus is never unanimous, but each voice arrives at a place of caution. She answers them with the mixture of charm and menace that has kept her alive. She allows a small, controlled touch to a junior seer to prove she will not lie when she does touch. The gesture is both demonstration and diplomacy. It shows she can be precise, ethical, and effective. The seers reciprocate with a small revelation. The skein shows her as a significant branching point. They reveal that choices now will not merely alter her fate, but will ossify into paths that shape the craftworlds and perhaps entire systems. The weight of that knowledge sits on her like a gauntlet. Yet the seers are also pragmatic. They offer guarded aid, access to archives, counsel from scholars who have mapped breaches, and the possibility of slow teachings that will help her translate dimensional mechanics without inviting the warp. Their aid is conditional, wrapped in ceremonies and oaths that the Eldar have refined over millennia. They ask for tokens of transparency and small services in return, things that will align her interest with their long-term preservation. It is not an easy bargain, but it is a workable one. When they finally, formally welcome her, it feels less like acceptance and more like a contract written into the air. She is acknowledged as a node worthy of attention. To the Eldar, she is a variable that could change the map, and they will watch how she moves. For Sylvie, the reception is both relief and new obligation. She has earned a foothold in a community that understands the warp's logic better than most, and with that foothold comes the pressure to shape her decisions in ways that honor more than her own survival. The circle tightens into a partnership, fragile and necessary, with the craftworld's watchers as both mentors and auditors. She is received as a fate to be tended, and she knows their watch will be long. They lead her into a dome that smells of cooled crystal and old prayers, a room where echoes are deliberately kept from wandering. At the center rests a pool of liquid glass that seems to contain more depth than its surface permits. The seers stand around it like guardians of a delicate machine. When she approaches, the watcher ripples as if it recognizes new intent and then settles to pattern, forming images like dreams made precise. The pool does not tell in plain lines. It offers branches, threads of possible futures woven into a lattice she can follow with her eyes and feel with her bones. Sylvie kneels and peers into the glass as one might read the skin of a prophet. The first path is intoxicating, a future in which she accepts a dark instrument offered by a changeling god and becomes a new kind of sovereign, a herald of change whose influence remakes systems. In that vision, she commands armies not by force alone, but by rewriting wills and loyalties. It is seductive because it promises agency on a scale she has never held. The second path is brutal. She is hunted, captured by those who fear what she might become, broken into an exemplar to teach others fear. The third is quieter and almost impossibly noble. A return home, a tale in which she uses knowledge gained here to slip back between worlds and save what she left. The fourth is catastrophic. The warp consumes the craftworld she touches, and her own world becomes a feedstock for a god of change. The seers do not narrate these probabilities as certainties. They present them as weights, as shapes the skein could harden into based on choices made now. They warn that time will not be neutral. Each act is a pressed seal that shapes future options. Their caution is not cruelty but clarity. They have seen nodes like her before, and the paths those nodes carve often close without clear notice. Small compromises become chains. Small bargains calcify into empires. Sylvie feels the gravity of those futures with a physical thrum beneath her ribs. Her own desires and fears show up in the images like fingerprints, and the pool makes them undeniable. Where she once could justify bargains as tactical, the visions force her to see long arcs, how a single choice might yield safety today and slavery tomorrow. The weighting is precise enough to terrify. She sees how cooperating with the thousand suns might grant her leverage, but also seed dependence. She sees how being a beacon to the Inquisition could bring a brutal order that kills what she came to save. She sees that her enchantment could be the very tool to bend entire peoples to a single will if she chooses to abuse it. The scope of her potential agency dawns on her like both weapon and verdict. The seers ask nothing of her, but that she comprehend the scale of her acts. They press the idea that wise stewardship of power means more than personal survival. It requires selecting which futures to enable and which to forestall. That instruction is an unfamiliar burden for someone used to surviving by improvisation and decisive strikes. The pool does not tell her which path to pick. Instead, it gives her responsibility and the clarity to understand what responsibility means in a galaxy where the warp is both temptation and catalyst. She withdraws from the pool with new weight in her step. The choices are no longer abstract. They are mapped and immediate. She must think not only of the next skirmish, but of the centuries that might follow. The revelation is cold and empowering. She has carved paths by moving through these places already, and every further step will make some of those paths permanent. The seers watch her rise, and she understands that their trust will be measured in patience and tests. Her next moves will be more deliberate because the cost of improvisation is now written for her to read. The first alarm is not a siren, but a tremor in the wraithbone itself, a shudder like a living creature gasping in pain. The seers of Ulwe feel it before the machinery does. Their eyes snap open in unison, irises clouding with fractured visions no mortal mind could bear. A moment later, the true alarms ignite, low, resonant notes that echo through the craftworld like morning bells. Sylvie stands in a vaulted hallway as the sound rolls past, sinking into the very architecture. She feels the shift not simply in her ears, but in her bones. The craftworld is afraid. Through crystalline windows and psychic viewports, the impossible sight unfolds. A tier in real space, wide as a battlefield and bright with colors that should not exist, bleeding pure psychic force into the void. Imperial ships, vast cathedral-like vessels armored in dogma, edge toward the anomaly, attempting to probe or contain it with stubborn human resolve. Their hulls warp under the pressure. Their engines scream. Some implode soundlessly, vanishing into a maelstrom that folds them like broken paper. The seers murmur that the breach is no natural wound. It pulses with intent like a creature sniffing the air. Sylvie senses even more, a familiar presence tasting her world through the growing tear. It is the same hunger that lingered in the dying craftworld, the same maddening curiosity that traced her through memory runes. A changeling god, hope turned weapon, ambition turned predator, reaches through the breach like a hand searching for a new toy. Always warriors rush to defensive posts, runes flickering across armor and blades. But Sylvie knows instinctively that this is no ordinary threat. It is not a fleet or a monster. It is a will, a cosmic intellect twisting the fabric of existence to find her. She feels its attention brush her skin like a whisper of cold silk. It knows she does not belong in this galaxy. It knows she has a home elsewhere. And it wants that home, wants to seep into it through the crack her arrival once opened. The breach grows, the craftworld quakes. The infinity circuit moans with pressure building across dimensions. Sylvie watches imperial vessels break against the anomaly like insects against a flame. The humans do not understand what they are facing. Even Ulwi, ancient, wounded, defiant, knows only how to hold, not how to close such a wound. A surge runs through Sylvie's mind, a psychic gust that tastes of temptation and hunger. She realizes the entity is not only approaching, it is calling her, testing her, challenging her to respond. If she does nothing, the breach will widen until the galaxy cracks. If she runs, the entity will slip through the weak seam she once opened. If she bargains, she risks becoming the very thing she fled all her life, an agent of someone else's design. The wraithbone groans beneath her boots, echoing a truth she cannot avoid. The breach is not merely a threat to this universe. It is a doorway aimed at hers, and she is the hinge. Sylvie inhales the icy air, feeling her frostborn strength coil within her limbs. She looks at the tear, at the drifting debris of shattered imperial faith, at the shimmering edges of a god's interest. This is not a storm she can outrun. This is a summons. The threat is not only cosmic, it is personal, and it is coming faster than any ally can act. The pressure of the breach grows until the very air of Ulwi feels thin, stretched, nervous. Sylvie retreats into a quiet alcove, not to hide, but to isolate the voice creeping along the edges of her thoughts. It speaks in riddles and promises, soft as velvet and sharp as broken ice. Each word is a lure: rule here, claim power unbound, let ambition become a crown. It tells her she could guide the course of empires, remake the laws of reality, reshape destiny itself if she would only open herself to its influence. The god's tone is warm, intimate, as though it has studied her desires and chosen precisely how to whisper to them. She recognizes the technique too well. Countless beings across countless worlds have tried to twist her choices, her identity, her future. This one is more dangerous only because it understands her deepest contradiction, her hunger for autonomy paired with her lingering longing for a place where she can finally stop running. The god offers her freedom dressed as sovereignty, but she knows the trap beneath the silk. Nothing offered by a cosmic will comes without the surrender of self. Heralds are not rulers. They are tools. The voice grows sweeter. It tells her she could bring meaning back to the dying craft worlds. It shows visions of her wielding illusions like reality, enchantments like law, frost like a blade that divides galaxies. She sees herself standing atop shattered thrones, bending empires with a touch. It is a vision that tastes of triumph, and for a heartbeat she almost believes she wants it. But then she sees the truth beneath the dream. Her image is distorted at the edges, stretched into something no longer her. Her will feels thin in the vision, diluted by a greater presence hidden behind her smile. She is powerful, yes, but only as long as the changeling god desires her to be. The moment she is no longer useful, she will be reshaped, consumed, or discarded. Sylvie steps back from the vision, steadying her breath. She has fought too long and survived too much to be bait for any god. Her freedom has been carved from the bones of those who tried to own her. Her identity is a blade she forged herself, sharp, flexible, unpredictable. No cosmic will, no matter how grand, gets to hold that blade. She reaches into her pocket and brushes the hilt of one of her knives. The cold metal grounds her, reminding her of who she is when illusions fall away. Not a ruler, not a pawn, a survivor built of stubborn will and fractured brilliance, a creature who finds her own path even when the universe tries to script her role. The voice pulses again, frustrated now. It offers threats wrapped in promises. Sylvie ignores them. The decision has been made. If the changeling god wants a doorway into her world, it will have to get through her. She steps from the alcove into the rushing corridors of Ulwi, where seers sprint toward defensive stations and psychic lightning crawls across the walls. Her resolve settles like a lock clicking shut. She will not bargain, she will not kneel. She will fight. The seers gather in frantic circles, chanting stabilization rites and attempting to weave protective barriers across the craftworld's perimeter. Their chants are beautiful but insufficient, threads of song attempting to bind a storm capable of devouring universes. Sylvie watches for several moments, absorbing their patterns the way she once studied the choreography of guardians she fought beside and against. Every movement reveals structure, every chant exposes limitations. The Eldar seek to hold the breach, but the breach does not want to be held. She realizes closure is not the answer. Sealing a tier this vast would require force greater than the craftworld possesses, greater than any mortal could summon without burning away the edges of their soul. The changeling god wants her to attempt closure, because failure would break her and leave the gateway wide open. But redirection, that is a different kind of act, one of misdirection, one of trickery, one that suits her nature far better. Sylvie kneels by a wraithbone console and lets her hand glide along its surface, feeling the harmonic signature of the breach. It is chaotic, but chaos is not random. It has rhythm, pulse, appetite. She can work with that. She can shape that. She can trick it into feeding itself rather than expanding outward. She sends threads of enchantment across Ulwi, touching minds lightly, seers, warriors, pilots, never to control them but to borrow flickers of their perception. Through their eyes she sees the field around the breach as a lattice of potential channels. Every dying reactor in the drifting Imperial ships burns with unstable energy. Every psychic crystal embedded in Ulwi's hull vibrates in sympathetic distress. Every fragment of warp bleed can be a conduit if twisted properly. She forms a plan that is half spellwork and half sleight of hand. She will not seal the breach. She will teach it to swallow its own chaos. She will turn its outward force inward, binding it in a loop that tightens as it feeds. A cage not built of walls but of appetite. Her frost giant strength becomes an asset in this subtle architecture. She grips shattered metal and shifts the debris of a broken cruiser into alignment with the psychic currents. She braces unstable structures that will serve as anchor points. Her enchantments spread across the dead and dying machines like fine veins, channeling energy through them the way a trickster channels lies through a conversation, carefully, artfully, dangerously. Then come the knives. She carves sigils into hull fragments, each cut a rule written into the universe's skin, not commands, suggestions, not barriers, redirects. The universe prefers to follow paths of least resistance. She simply builds those paths with runic precision. The seers watch with awe and fear. They know what she is doing is reckless. They know no Eldar would dare it. They also know they cannot stop her. Sylvie rises, breathing hard. The plan is simple in concept, lethal in execution. Turn the breach's hunger upon itself, and let it collapse under the weight of its own desire. The void welcomes her with silence sharp enough to cut. Sylvie steps into space through the opened airlock of an Eldar strike vessel, her cloak wrapped tight and shimmering with protective magic. The vacuum pulls heat from her skin, but her frostborn physiology holds firm. Around her, shattered Imperial cruisers drift like broken cathedrals. The breach dominates everything, a swirling wound of iridescent madness, colors folding into shapes that no sane geometry could contain. The changeling god feels her arrival. Its presence presses into her skull like 1,000 whispered predictions. It hurls visions at her, possible failures, possible triumphs, fragmented futures designed to give her doubt. Sylvie grits her teeth, gripping two knives so cold they steam even in vacuum. She holds on to herself the way a drowning swimmer clings to surface air. Her identity becomes her shield. She begins the working. Illusions stretch from her hands like threads of starlight, weaving a lattice around the breach. Not illusions of sight, but illusions of function, tricks aimed at the fabric of spacetime itself. She convinces the tear that its natural direction is inward, not outward. She lies to physics with the skill of a born trickster, shaping reality as though it were a story she refuses to let end badly. The breach pushes back. Psychic force lashes out, ripping through her mental defenses like shards of burning glass. Sylvie snarls and shifts tactic, using possession not on minds but on fragments of warp energy. She slips into the pulse of the storm, treating it like a mind to be nudged, not a force to be resisted. For seconds at a time, she influences its movement, guiding its hunger down her constructed pathways. Her cloak whips violently, her bones ache. The runes carved into debris flicker and flare, channeling tremendous pressure. The Eldar ship behind her groans in psychic pain as its pilot struggles to maintain position. The changeling grows angry. It manifests conceptual claws that tear into her consciousness, trying to unravel her identity thread by thread. For a moment she feels herself slipping into someone taller or smaller or crueler or softer, someone entirely not Sylvie. She screams silently into the void and drives a knife into her own thigh, the jolt of pain anchoring her back into her body. The lattice begins to form fully. Energy that once surged outward now spirals inward, tightening into a whirlpool of shifting color and howling power. Sylvie pours the last of her strength into sealing the final runic connection, her illusion weave shimmering with instability. One last psychic strike crashes into her. She staggers, her mind buckles, but she reaches out not with fear but with defiance and steals a moment of the god's attention, forcing it to watch her become the author of its temporary defeat. Her laugh is breathless, mad, victorious. The lattice snaps into place. The breach folds in upon itself with a roar that cannot be heard, only felt, an implosion of light and will that pulses through Sylvie's bones. The whirlpool she crafted tightens, shrinks, then collapses into a single spear of structured energy that shoots backward into the warp. The universe shudders as the tear vanishes. For a heartbeat, all is still. Then the backlash hits. A shockwave slams into the surrounding void, hurling Sylvie backward through space. The Eldar strike vessel catches her in a blossoming shield, but even so she collides with its hull hard enough to bruise even frost giant muscle. Alarms flash within as systems overload. The pilot fights to regain control. In the distance, surviving Imperial ships tumble chaotically, engines flickering like dying candles. They are damaged but alive, saved by the collapse rather than consumed by it. Ulwi breathes a psychic sigh of relief that Sylvie feels in the back of her skull. The seer's chants soften, the wraithbone steadies, the craftworld lives another day. But Sylvie does not celebrate, not yet. She sits on the cold metal of the airlock floor, breathing raggedly, exhaustion crashing into her like a tide. Her hands tremble not from fear, but from the enormity of what she has just done. She has outwitted a god, redirected a cosmic wound, saved countless lives, and severed herself from the closest bridge to home. She knows the moment it happens, a snapping sensation deep in her magic, a string pulled too tight finally breaking. The breach she redirected was the same seam that once accidentally pulled her across realities. Closing it means that path is gone, not locked, not hidden, erased. A hollow ache settles in her chest. She has traded her swiftest escape for the survival of worlds that are not hers. It is a sacrifice she did not plan and cannot undo. The Eldar seer Ithril approaches, stepping lightly into the chamber. His voice carries complex emotions, gratitude, awe, and a sorrow he does not bother to hide. He tells her that Ulwi owes her a debt, though he warns that chaos now marks her more deeply than before. Sylvie nods quiet. She knows the mark. She felt the god's attention linger even as the breach collapsed, as if it memorized her shape, her will, her scent. She knows it will reach for her again. But she also knows she has not lost. She has time. She has allies. She has her knives and her mind. She has the stubborn will of someone who refuses to bow, even when the universe rearranges itself to force the attempt. She rises unsteadily, frost forming on her palms as she pushes herself upright. The galaxy stretches ahead of her, dark, treacherous, indifferent. But she walks into it with purpose. She has closed one door. She will find or carve another. The breach's collapse sends ripples far beyond Ulwi. In its wake, a quiet shifts through the warp, the kind of silence that precedes speculation among beings who measure centuries the way mortals measure breaths. Sylvie does not witness these reactions directly. She feels them as a pressure at the edge of perception, a collective awareness turning toward the place where she stood and defied a god's reach. The Imperium learns of her before the debris of their ships finishes drifting. Surviving captains, trembling and astounded, report the impossible, a lone figure wrapped in green-gold distortion, wielding power neither psychic nor technological, standing before the breach and altering it with gestures no human codex could classify. Their astropaths scream warnings. Their inquisitors whisper of a Hirdek witch born from Xeno's sin. Their lords add her name to lists meant for purging or capture. The Imperium fears what it cannot brand, control, or sanctify, and Sylvie has proven beyond doubt that she belongs to none of its categories. The Thousand Suns feel her victory like a thorn lodged beneath the skin of prophecy. Somewhere in the blue-lit halls of a wandering sorcerer cult, Ahriman pauses mid-ritual as a tremor runs through the weave. Her will, her trickery, her refusal to bow, these qualities mark her as dangerous and fascinating to scholars of the warp. The librarian she defied will recount her techniques with a mixture of admiration and bitterness. They tasted her strength, and in doing so tasted the possibility of their own undoing. She is not prey to them now. She is a rival. The Drukhari, scattered across their shadowed arenas and torture galleries, gossip with cruel delight. They remember the feel of her enchantment slithering through one of their own, cutting through sadistic hunger with cold precision. Some of their cabals see insult, others see challenge, a few see entertainment. They etch her likeness into ledgers, not a debt of blood but of interest. A mind that resists agony and manipulates desire is a rarity worth hunting or courting. But the greatest shift occurs far beyond mortal or demonic courts. High above the golden world of Terra, entombed within a throne of machinery and faith, a fragmented consciousness flares with unexpected awareness. The Emperor, half dead, half divine, feels a thread of possibility tug at the skein of fate, a new variable, a new threat, a new hope. Something that should not exist in his galaxy now moves freely within it. And elsewhere on a world unknowable, a figure plated in radiant armor, gold like burning dawn, turns a helm toward the stars. A Primarch, restored or dreaming, feels the pattern shift. Sylvie, a stranger to their histories, has become a piece on a board older than empires. They do not yet know what move she will make, but they have seen how she arrived, sideways, unpredictable, and defiant. Eyes both mortal and mythic study her now. The galaxy has gained a new player, and none can predict whether she will be its ruin or its miracle. Ulwi, once wary, now opens its halls to her with measured trust. The craftworld recognizes the truth. Sylvie is not a mere wanderer. She is a force that bends the trajectory of cosmic threats. They cannot command her, nor do they wish to, but they understand that an ally who can defy a warp god is worth nurturing. The seers convene and offer her a pact carved not in coercion, but in mutual necessity. They will give her sanctuary from the Imperium's wrath and the predations of chaos. They will teach her the slow, ancient disciplines of rune logic, the elegant mathematics by which Eldar mind and matter converse. She, in return, will share the tricks the galaxy has never seen, illusion that does not merely hide, but redefines perception, enchantment that bends will without consuming it, dimensional intuition born not of psychic training, but of lived chaos. Sylvie accepts the pact with a nod sharpened by instinctual caution. Trust is a luxury she rarely permits, but knowledge is a weapon, and here she finds a library forged from centuries of survival. Always scholars guide her through rune circles that hum with quiet power. They show her how to feel the warp's edge without inviting it in, how to assemble psychic harmonies that stabilize rather than tempt. She learns to carve sigils with her knives that do not wound, but instruct the universe to behave differently. In return, she teaches the Eldar how to cast illusions not bound to psychic patterns, but born of narrative manipulation, illusions that reshape what an enemy believes about themselves. Warriors learn to shift fear into confidence, despair into resolve, by bending their own reflections. Some seers marvel, others whisper uneasily about the subtlety of her craft, but they all agree that her techniques are potent. Together, their shared knowledge becomes preparation. The galaxy is not static, threats will come. The Imperium will send hunters. The Thousand Suns will send scholars and soldiers. The changeling god will stretch its fingers again. Even the Drukhari may descend in glee or vengeance. Ulwe cannot stand alone, and neither can Sylvie. So they prepare not merely to endure, but to strike surgically, cleverly, preemptively. Sylvie assists in weaving veiled sanctuaries across the craftworld, hiding it not with brute illusion but with folded perception. Eldar artisans help refine her dimensional sense, teaching her how to thread between pockets of safer reality. Each lesson is a blade honed. Each collaboration is a seed planted. An uneasy alliance becomes a partnership. A partnership becomes a strategy. Strategy becomes a quiet, simmering resistance waiting for the moment to act. Sylvie remains on Ulwe, not as a prisoner nor as a refugee, but as a co-conspirator with a dying culture determined to outlive its doom. In their shared preparation, she rediscovers something she thought she had lost. Purpose. Sylvie stands at the boundary of the webway gate, watching Ulwe's runic lights swirl like constellations learning to breathe. The craftworld glides through hidden routes known only to seers, but she remains perfectly still, a lone figure framed by living wraithbone, knives at her hips, cloak drifting like a second, defiant heartbeat. The galaxy sprawls before her in all its grim darkness, its endless wars, its unyielding tragedies. And yet, within that darkness, she sees opportunity stitched like silver threads waiting to be pulled. She has not become a savior. She has not become a destroyer. She is something the Imperium has no scripture for, something chaos has no prophecy for, something the Eldar have no name for, a free agent in a universe obsessed with chains. The changeling god will not forget her humiliation. It will whisper into cracks of reality, crafting futures where she kneels or breaks or ascends beyond sanity. But Sylvie has seen its visions, and she refuses to be written by any hand but her own. The Imperium will hunt her. Their fleets will search for the anomaly witch, the impossible interloper whose magic mocks their limited understanding. They will call her heretic, monster, xenosympathizer. They will be wrong in every definition that matters. The Thousand Suns will watch her rise with fascination, eager to dissect her defiance. They will wait for a moment of weakness and find none easy to exploit. The Drukhari will whisper her name in their arenas, wagering whether she will bring agony or delight when next they cross paths. And somewhere far across the stars, a golden-armored watcher contemplates her arrival with a quiet, unknowable interest, a spark of hope or dread neither he nor she can yet define. But in this moment, Sylvie chooses neither fear nor destiny. She chooses motion. She chooses rebellion against the roles the cosmos demands she play. Knife in hand, mind unbowed, she steps forward into the unknown, into opportunity, into war, into legend. Because in a galaxy where prophecy is shackled by gods and tyrants, there is a rare, fragile power in a being who refuses to be predictable. Sylvie is no longer a visitor pulled across realities. She is a variable, a disruption, a possibility. A legend whose story begins not with a crown, nor with a fall, but with a choice. To bend fate not toward chaos, nor obedience, but toward purpose. And in the grim darkness of the far future, that kind of purpose is more dangerous than any god. If you hunger for more tales of impossible encounters in the dark millennium, smash that subscribe button, and the Emperor protects those who support the channel.